When you started working that first job as an assistant, what are some of the lessons that you pulled out of there about just the business in general? What are those things that they don't tell you about in film school, that they, the hard knocks, the shrapnel, as I call it, that you get? What were those things that you got in that first job?
Relationships are everything. You cannot meet enough people. Your Rolodex cannot be big enough. Every moment you're not at the desk should be a moment spent having lunch with someone new, cocktails with someone new, dinner with someone new, or going on a hike with someone that you hadn't met prior, or someone who's a friend of so-and-so's. So your network can never be vast enough or large enough. It really is a business built on relationships.
This episode is brought to you by Bulletproof Script Coverage, where screenwriters go to get their scripts read by top Hollywood professionals. Learn more at covermyscreenplay.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Alan Trezza. How you doing, Alan?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Alex.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I appreciate you coming on, and you reached out to me that you've been listening to a couple of episodes recently and gotten hooked. So I appreciate that.
Definitely. Yeah, it's actually funny. It was the episode with Carrie Woods that really sort of got me thinking about my crazy journey, becoming a writer and a filmmaker and a producer, because my first internship during my senior year of college was actually for Woods Entertainment, which was Carrie Woods' company. So it just really got me thinking about the old days and the crazy journey that I've been on. So, yeah. And then ever since then, I've just been listening to all the past podcasts. And like I said, I read your book, Shooting for the Mob, which I thought was one of the most true accounts of trying to get a movie made. And just been a fan ever since.
I really appreciate that, man. Yeah, I some people, after they read that book or while they're reading it, they call me up and like, I don't know if you're going to make it. I'm like, I made it. Trust me, I made it through.
Definitely did. Yeah. You made a positive out of a big negative, which is a lot of what it takes to make it in this industry, because there's more negatives than there are positives. But if you can change those negatives into a positive, then you're on the right track.
So why in God's green earth did you want to get into this insanity that is the film industry, sir?
Why? Well, because when I was 11 years old, I saw A Clockwork Orange. And
I'm sorry, stop for a second. 11 years old, you saw Clockwork Orange?
11 years old. Yes, I did. Yes.
Your parents are awesome.
My parents did not know about that. It was a big secret for many, many years. But I saw that movie, and for most people, that can also be seen as a negative, but I turned it into a positive because it made me realize that films were not just about special effects and jokes. Films were a way of communicating ideas and thoughts and taking chances and asking tough questions. And it was really an eye-opener, as you can imagine, being an 11-year-old and seeing that film. I mean, just the first 10 minutes. And I just said to myself, how did this come into existence? Who's responsible for this? And of course, it was Stanley Kubrick. So I would go to the library and pull every book on him and then go through his entire oeuvre, Barry Lyndon and 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Shining. And each and every film was more experimental, different than the last, constantly pushing boundaries, and in a way, perfect. He made perfect films, in my opinion. You can't improve upon them. They're the best versions of those stories. And ever since then, I've sort of been infatuated with films and making movies, and that's what led me on this journey.
So how did you get into this insanity?
Well, yeah, I'm from Long Island. It's about as far away from Hollywood as you can possibly get. But I went to college in New York City at Fordham University and took every film course possible. My weekends were spent with a Super 8 camera, making movies with classmates. And then also, like I said, getting an internship for Woods Entertainment and working for Carrie Woods, who at the time was one of the most incredible producers. He was responsible for Night Shyamalan's first movie, Scott Rosenberg's first scripts he produced. He produced Scream, Copland, James Mangold's movie. So I really wanted to learn, what it was like to get in on the ground floor, and working for Woods was incredible. Upon graduating, Carrie's VP gave me a list of names of executives in Hollywood, because I was really thinking about making a move out here where I am currently. And the top name on the list was Robbie Brenner. Robbie Brenner was an executive at Miramax Films at the time, and flew out here with a one-way ticket, stayed on a few couches, and eventually got an interview with Robbie, and got the job to be her assistant. And the first script that Robbie gave me, and this is in the late 90s, I think this is 1999, the first script that Robbie gave me to read and cover was The Dallas Buyers Club. And she said, "Read this, Alan, I'm going to make this one day." Flash forward to 2014, it's the Oscars, and she's nominated for Best Picture. And Robbie taught me a very valuable lesson. She said, this business is all about passion. If you have passion for material, if you have passion for filmmaking and films, you're going to make it. And she's been an incredible mentor. Now she's running the film division at Mattel, and she's in London making Barbie right now with Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie. So that's what sort of got me started. And I was on an executive path for a long time. I was a development executive for Drew Barrymore at Flower Films, which was incredible. And one day I get a call, and it's Robbie again, saying that Tony and Ridley Scott are looking for a development executive. I said, "Great. Good luck finding one for them." She goes, "No, I'm calling because you're the guy." And I was like, "Well, I've kind of been hanging out with Drew for a while, working on some rom-coms and stuff." She goes, No one loves movies like you. They love movies. You love movies. You have that in common. It's hard to find out here." So 4 months of interviews later, I was working at Scott Free with Tony and Ridley, my heroes. And that was an incredible experience. But all the while, I kind of wanted to make my own stories and write my own sort of tales and movies. So one day I had the idea to write a short film about a guy whose ex-girlfriend comes back as a zombie, and can't get rid of her, can't kill her. So what's he to do? And that turned into a short film called Burying the Ex, which played at a few festivals. And a few years after that, ended up getting made as a feature film directed by another one of my heroes, Joe Dante. So I guess that's what got me started.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into Buried with the Exes. I'm really interested in that story, but I didn't know that you worked with Ridley and Tony. So I have to ask, what is it like working with those legends? Tony, rest his soul, he literally changed action movies. I mean,
yes, he did.
The moment he made Top Gun, all action movies changed. That's and then a few years later, Michael Bay showed up with The Rock and Bad Boys, and then all action films changed again. But Tony was one of those guys that just, even to the very end, he was more experimental than any of his younger contemporaries. Yeah. I mean, you look at Domino, you look at
Man on Fire. Mm-hmm.
Man on Fire. He was doing things that nobody else had the balls to do. I mean, he was on the edge creatively, and also technically, just the stuff that he was doing with the film. So what was it like working with Tony? And then obviously Ridley is, Ridley.
Yeah. Ridley changed the game in the sci-fi field as well as the epics. What was it like? You would not know from being in a room with them that they were the legends that they are. That's to say, the most down to earth, the most jovial, the most approachable people you can imagine. So much so that I had to at times remind myself, oh my God, I'm across the table from the guy who made Blade Runner, or I'm across the table from the guy who made Crimson Tide. I remember one day, and they were like Robbie told me, they just loved movies. So they would come into my office at various times just to talk about movies, and hey, did you see this, or what have you seen that you liked? And we would just kind of go on and on and on, and every once in a while I have to be like, oh my god, that's Ridley Scott talking to me, because they're just so down to earth, and they were so cool. And one of the greatest compliments I can give them is they were very close, but you could not get more different in terms of their art, right?
Very much.
I mean, most people are sort of, carbon copies of their siblings and stuff like that, but you could not get more different than Tony and Rid. But they were each incredible at what they did, and just so funny and so witty. But always strive for perfection. They always strive for perfection, but at the same time, try to have a good time during that mission that they were after.
Were there any creative lessons you learned as far as how they worked, how they broke down a script, what they looked at story, how they I'm assuming you were there from the script point all the way to when you saw something actually get produced, and how it might have changed along the line, looking through their lenses. What are those things that you learned there?
Yeah, with Tony, it was a lot about character. It was character first. If we can fall in love with the character, we'll be along for the ride. The character's journey is the story. Ridley, of course, is more of the world builder. So he was very interested in the world and the milieu and the setting and the time period, and tons of research had to go into Robin Hood and to Gladiator and getting all those details correct. If he had a handle on the world, he had a handle on the story. And with Tony, it was more about character. So that's sort of what I learned from both of them, and trying to merge the two in order to make something truly remarkable.
When you started working that first job as an assistant, what are some of the lessons that you pulled out of there about just the business in general? What are those things that they don't tell you about in film school, that they, the hard knocks, the shrapnel, as I call it, that you get? What were those things that you got in that first job?
Relationships are everything. You cannot meet enough people. Your Rolodex cannot be big enough. Every moment you're not at the desk should be a moment spent having lunch with someone new, cocktails with someone new, dinner with someone new, or, going on a hike with someone that you hadn't met prior, or someone who's a friend of so-and-so's. So your network can never be vast enough or large enough. It really is a business built on relationships. And then again, perseverance. A lot of the people that were coming up back then, who are now, very big stars now in the filmmaking world and the producing world, were people that just hustled. I mean, they were just constantly pushing that mountain, that rock up that mountain, the Sisyphus example, just constantly doing it. And then, again, the passion, the people with the passion for it, the people who when they got on the phone and they were pitching you something, they weren't like car salesmen. They were really, really in love with what the script that they had, or the idea that they wanted to give you. So those were the main lessons. You mentioned networking and building relationships, which is such a crucial part of our business. And I've discovered that years ago. How do you do it properly, in your opinion? Because I found so many young writers, young filmmakers, young actors, they walk up to someone like you or me at a party, and they just start like, hey, read my script. Hey, do this for me. Hey, can you connect me to this guy? I mean, you have no idea how many emails I get on a daily basis after someone comes on my show and they're like, hey, can you send this script to John Leguizamo? I'm like, no. Right. That's not the way the world works. Can you explain to them how you should actually build and actually network, and how to build authentic relationships? Yeah. Well, to go back to Carrie Woods, I got that internship from a cold call. I had actually seen Screen at a test screening and said, this is going to change genre movies. Who's involved in this? Okay, Wes. I know about Wes. Kevin Williamson, this up and coming screenwriter, but who's the person who kind of made the movie, who produced it? And I saw that it was Carrie Woods. I can't remember how I got the number, but he just so happened to have had an office in Chelsea, not too far from Fordham University where I was going to school. And I found that number and I cold called. And I just think there was something in my voice that was very honest, that I was very, very passionate about this business, and I wanted to be a part of it. And I think that that's something that you can't fake. And whenever I'm approached by someone and I can sense that passion and I can sense that authenticity, then I'm more than likely to, engage. And then, as I said, it's the sort of the used car salesman mentality, or the people who sort of want to be in it for alternate reasons. They're going to have a more difficult time, because we can sense that. We have very good sort of BS detectors, right? So if they come at you being honest and true and just authentic and saying, look, I know you don't know me, but I really want to do this. It's been my dream, and I've been writing scripts for X number of years. I think this one is the one. Would you please read it? That's different than, so this is my first script, but it's incredible and it's a masterpiece, and I'm going to be Kubrick one day, and Aronofsky it wants to produce my first movie, and I've got CAA calling me, and I've also got, ICM calling me. It's kind of like, right? Who are you going to trust more? So if you're authentic, if you're honest, and if you're respectful too, respect people's times, respect people, their privacy, I think you're going to be okay.
You said something really important there. I want to kind of dig into a little bit. Authenticity. Mm-hmm. Not only the authenticity of when you're trying to not pitch somebody, but trying to build a relationship, how to be truly authentic and being of service to that person. But do you believe that the reason for the people who succeed in our business is because of their own authenticity? Ridley and Tony were authentic to who they were. They were not trying to be anybody else. Carrie Woods was not trying to be anybody else. You have not tried to be anybody else. That is the secret sauce that kind of sets us all apart from everybody else. Because if we all try to be Quentin Tarantino, it's not going to work out.
Yeah, there was already one Quentin Tarantino.
And he does a pretty good job at that.
That's right. Well, look, the best example I can give you is a personal example. I've been writing scripts for many, many, many years, and I've sold a few. The two that I've had made so far were the ones I thought no one would be interested in. They were the ones only I was interested in. Okay. A comedy about a guy whose ex-girlfriend comes back as a zombie. That was written before The Walking Dead was the #1 show on TV. That was written before Zombieland. That was written before World War Z. I wrote that because it was a story that I had that I wanted to see. And if I couldn't see it, at least it'd be there on paper. And if I wanted to see it, I could read it and picture it in my head. That one got made. My second film, We Summon the Darkness, takes place in the 80s. It's about heavy metal and the Satanic Panic. That was written before Stranger Things. That was written before the whole 80s wave. I simply sat down and wanted to write a movie I wanted to see, a movie that was personal to me. I grew up in the 80s. I was in a heavy metal band. I had a lot of people thinking that I was a Satanist because I listened to King Diamond. And I wanted to write a story about that. That ended up getting made. The other scripts that I sold, I've sold scripts to Paramount. I've sold scripts to Miramax. Those are on the shelf somewhere. They're commercial for sure, and they ended up getting at studios. But as I said, it's the ones that were more personal to me, that there was just some driving force behind them, and other people got on board, and we pushed that mountain up that hill, and we got those movies made. So I think there's something to be said about that.
So let's talk about that first film, Buried with the X. You made that Burying the X. Yeah. That was a short that you made first, right? So you produce a short. How do you get the short to a feature, which so many people listening have tried to do that, myself included, by the way, trying to make short films to get a shot at a feature. So you didn't just get a feature, you also got it directed by a legend, by the legendary Joe Dante. So what was the story from the short to the feature and getting Joe involved?
Okay, cool. So the short is something I'm extremely proud of. I directed it. I was one of the producers on it. I wrote it. We had a fantastic cast. The The lead was John Francis Daly, from Freaks and Geeks fame. He's now a very, very famous writer-director. He's directing Dungeons and Dragons right now with Chris Pine. And one of the other leads was Danielle Harris from the Halloween franchise. One of my favorite actresses growing up, because I love those movies so much. But I had made that film just by calling in favors, as I said. Everyone I knew, everyone I had met along the way, at every company I worked with. I ended up getting it shot on the Paramount Genesis camera, which was an incredible camera at the time. My DP had a great relationship with Panavision, and we got the Panavision Genesis for a weekend. Just kind of checked it out and was like, I'll bring this back on Monday. Gave it back on Monday. But that got made. It was 15 minutes and played at a number of festivals. I think people really liked the tone, the energy, and of course the cast was pretty cool and recognizable. We played at Comic-Con and several other festivals. But the first step was really adapting it into a feature. I wasn't going to give it to an agent and say, here's my short, make a feature of it. They needed sort of like a proof of concept. They needed a script. So before doing that, I sat down and I had to kind of break apart that 15-minute short and see, okay, what's the story here? Where's the 90-minute version of this movie? And a lot of changes had to take place, in a lot of ways. I had to kind of forget the short and start from scratch. But, after about 3 or 4 months of writing, I came up with a 90-minute screenplay that I gave to a bunch of friends, and they were very honest with me. They said, this is actually really, really funny. I laughed at almost every page. And after that, it was just the search for money. Of course, we tried going out to studios, and there was some interest, because at the time, this was at the time when like studios had like their mini kind of genre divisions of their companies. I think like Paramount had one, Fox had one.
Oh yeah,
Fox,
Paramount Vantage.
Right, and Fox Atomic. I remember Fox Atomic. Yeah. They were kind of close on it. They because it could be made for a good budget and with genre and comedic. So yeah, it clicked all the boxes. But at the end of the day, they ended up passing. So we tried the studio route, passed. Again, it was the passion to try to get it made that made me say, okay, make this independently. A lot of your favorite movies are the independent films, out of Sundance and other festivals. Maybe this one could be yours. So went to every AFM, which is the American Film Market, which is in Santa Monica, California, once a year for about a week. People from all over the globe get together and they sell their movies and stuff like that. So I'd sneak in there because the badge is like $400 or something. So I would kind of sneak in or just try to mingle with people. And eventually, thankfully, I did meet some producers, Carl Effinson and Kyle Tequila. They had a company, and they were based out of Texas, and they really believed in it. And they were getting a company together and thought that this could be made for a price. And they came on board, and soon thereafter, it got to Joe's hands. I was meeting with Joe Dante, the next day. Couldn't believe it. I screwed up the first 2 minutes of the meeting because I sat down and I said, I have to tell you, I was 13 years old when I saw The Howling. And, and you could just see Joe be like, oh, God, thanks a lot for that. I was like, no, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like, I saw 13 years old.
Fart.
No. He goes, thanks for making me feel old. I said, no, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that. I meant it's the best werewolf transformation I'd ever seen, even better than John Landis's American Werewolf in London. Since then, that was years and years ago. We're still friends and we still email each other. And he's just an incredible human being. But yeah, it was many, many years of just, as I said, networking, going places, meeting new people, who's got money, who's interested in a zombie pick, this, and that. And then finally, I remember, the movie had some starts and then stops and then starts and then stops. And then when I thought the movie was basically dead and gone, World War Z came out. and ended up being the highest grossing film of Brad Pitt's career. And the next day we got a call from some financiers who said, "We hear you got a zombie pick. When can you get started?" And we were like, yesterday. And they said, go. And we were shooting that movie, and that's how that happened.
So between the moment that you finished the short to the moment you started production, how many years was that, sir? How many years was that, sir?
Conservatively 5, I would say. Conservatively 5.
So this is the question I have to ask you, man. And this is such an important question because so many of us have to go through this. How did you get through those 5 years? How did you get the energy to continue to push this boulder up a hill with no indication per se that it was actually going to get to its destination? You had Joe Dante, great, that's awesome. You had some elements to get the thing going, but even after first year or two, you're just like, okay, is this going to happen? Like, how psychologically, how did you get through it?
I mentor a lot of kind of young up and coming screenwriters because I want them to learn the lessons that took me sometimes years to learn. I want them to learn it, in an instant, to save them a lot of the hardships. The hardest part about making a movie is finding an idea that you fall in love with. That's the hardest part. Okay. And if you have that, you're already on your way, because in a lot of ways, it's like a marriage. There's going to be some good years. There's going to be some bad years. But if you truly love that idea, you're going to stick with it. And that's the best analogy I can give you. Look, if it was an idea that I wasn't truly head over heels in love with, we wouldn't be talking about this movie right now, right? But It was an idea that I truly loved. And like with any relationship, there's going to be incredible highs and devastating lows. And it's just a matter of sticking by with, the person that you fell in love with or the idea you fell in love with. There's something there that keeps you going. Okay. And that's the idea. So if anyone's having writer's block or, doesn't have the energy to sort of get up and keep going, odds are they're not truly head over heels in love with the idea. But this was an idea that I was in love with. So I stuck with it.
So were you on set most of the time when you were making that film?
Every single day. And Joe was incredibly collaborative.
So, all right. So question number one, there's always that day that the whole world is coming crashing down around you. Mm-hmm. If it was something that happened to you or was something that happened to the production or to Joe, and how did that person or that situation, how did you get through to the other side of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, thankfully, how we all got through was Joe. He was the captain of the ship, and the captain cannot show nervousness, anxiousness, anger, or any type of anxiety or doubt. And Joe never did. And I remember I was on day 2, which is usually on day 2 that I found from, the 2 movies that I've made. It's going to dictate where your movie's kind of going. Day 2, day 1, there's a lot of excitement. There's energy. Day 2, you're kind of like more into it, but you're starting to kind of see where some of the cracks might be. So when day 2 came along, I remember one of the producers came rolling up in a giant Escalade and came and said that they wanted to talk to Joe. And I said, uh-oh, here we go, gulp. And up until that time, they had, like happens to most independent films, they had slashed our budget a pretty good amount. And we could only shoot with 1 camera. And we only had 20 days to shoot the film. So 20 days, 1 camera. 2 cameras would be ideal, right? So you can get more coverage, half the time, but 1 camera, 20 days. I said, okay, this thing's going to look like Clerks. Unfortunately, what are you going to do, right? You can only put it down on sticks and shoot, and then you can't get too creative, right? And I also think they got rid of our Steadicam. I think they got rid of some dolly tracks.
What's the point of doing this then? If you can't, come on, man.
Exactly.
Right. We're all here. We're all the party's here. Let's just do it right.
Well, they just needed to slash and burn. So then day 2 comes around, and one of the producers comes in an Escalade and wants to talk to Joe. And I said, oh, here it is. He probably saw the dailies, says everything looks really static. And what the heck are you guys doing? And I'm going to cut more, I'm going to cut your days. So he asked to talk to Joe, and they go in the corner, and I see Joe talking to this producer, and the producer's kind of waving his hands like this, like going like that. I said, oh boy, he's asking why the footage looks so static and blah, 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 blah. And then about 2 minutes later, the producer shakes Joe's hand, waves goodbye, gets in the Escalade and drives away. And then I said, I went to Joe, I said, what's going on? Is everything okay? He goes, yeah. He says the footage looks amazing. He says, I'm making a $2.5 million movie look like a $5 million movie. And how do I get it to look like a $10 million movie? And I said, give me another camera, give me a steady cam, and give me some dolly tracks. He goes, cool, you got it. And then the next day we had our steady cam, and we had our dolly track, and we had our B camera. So yeah,
isn't that the way it works? It's just so fascinating. That's just the way, producers, financiers, sometimes it just drives me absolutely mad. What was, working with Joe, what was the biggest lesson you took away from just working with someone like that? It's such a close collaborative way.
Best idea wins. That's the best lesson. Doesn't matter if it comes from a PA, craft services, the AED, script supervisor, best idea wins. So keep an open set, encourage collaboration, encourage freedom with the words, with the script, with the story. You'll never know what you might find. The script is a fluid document. So what's funny is when I was shooting Burying and when I was shooting We Summon the Darkness, the person who asked for the most changes to the script was actually me, because I was seeing how the actors were portraying the characters, and I was seeing what they were bringing to it, and I wanted to bring out more of it. So I would constantly be changing dialogue and pages and have new pages, because, as I said, the movie takes a life of its own. It's not on 120 pages or 90 pages of paper anymore. It's now flesh and blood. So you have to adapt to that. And yeah, that's what I learned from Joe.
Now, how did you get your next film off the ground, which also sounds like you said, on paper, you had other ones much more commercial. How did this one get produced? Right.
So with it's called We Summon the Darkness. Again, I wanted to write something that could be made. So minimal locations, not a lot of effects, but with really hopefully good characters, good story, and some good twists. And ended up writing We Summon the Darkness. Same thing. It was an idea that I fell in love with. It was something I really wanted to see come to fruition. So then I started to reach out to some producers that I had met along the way. The first person I called was a producer named Christian Armagida, who was a very, very big genre fan, worked on a ton of genre movies. And I said, I think this guy might be the right person. I think he might see what I'm trying to do here, because it was very specific. It was a very kind of specific genre, specific tone, specific time period. Again, like I said, this is before Stranger Things. It was before the 80s were super cool. And I remember we had lunch one day, and he walked in wearing a Faith No More t-shirt. And I said, okay, that's cool. I dig them. And we just had a great talk for about 2 hours. And it was kind of like an informal job interview in a way, because I didn't bring up the script right away. It was only like in the last 10 minutes. I said, well, I've got something, and it's a little weird. It's a little strange. It's a little unique, but here it is. And he said, I think that sounds really cool. And 2 days, I sent him the script, and 2 days later, he said, I'd like to talk to you about this. I think you got something. So we worked on it together a little bit. He helped develop it, definitely. And then he sent it out to his network of people. It ended up getting on the blood list, not the blacklist. The blacklist is, the list of Hollywood's, favorite unproduced scripts. The blood list is the year-end list of unproduced genre scripts that people really love. So it ended up on there, which ended up getting it more reads. and we just started to put this movie together little by little. We needed some extra help in terms of the financing. So I called up the producer of my last film. I called up Kyle Tequila. And I said, Kyle, I know how hard you worked on Burying the Ex. I know how, like, when the going got really rough, that you just put it all out there. You just risked everything to get this thing going. Would you do the same thing for this? And he said, he goes, all right, if I read it and if I like it, I'm all in. I said, well, that's why I'm calling you. So he read it, he liked it, and sure enough, he was all in. So we had this little team now of Christian, Kyle, and myself. And then the search for a director began. And that took a long, long time. Whereas with Burying the Ex, Joe Dante was pretty quick to come on board. We went through, I think, about 5 directors. That's including a directing team. So that's 2. So ultimately, again, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. You're working with a director one day for several months, only to have their managers call you up and say, yeah, they just got offered a film at Universal and it's shooting next month. He's going to have to drop out. Needless to say, that film at Universal never got made. So, and we would say, is it real? And the managers would say, yes, it's 100% real. That film never got made, but we still lost the director as a result. And then finally, when we thought the movie was done and over, it was just before Christmas break. I think it was 2017, just before Christmas break. And, Kyle and Christian called me and they said, we saw a movie called My Friend Dahmer. I said, I know that one. It played at Sundance. It's really, really quite amazing. It's about Jeffrey Dahmer, but when he was in high school, told from the eyes of his best friend. And I said, yeah, that movie is actually kind of amazing. We've been looking at these genre filmmakers, like these kind of genre film festival kind of guys who are making a big splash. But here was like a real like art house filmmaker, a real sort of character-driven filmmaker. His name was Marc Meyers. And I said, well, good luck getting him, because he makes like real movies. Like, we're looking for like a fun genre film. They said, no, he likes it. And I got on the phone. Again, it was just before Christmas. Within 5 minutes, Mark says, I dig this script. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of A Clockwork Orange. And then, yeah. I remember we were all in separate parts of the world. I mean, Mark is New York City based, and I'm in the Valley in California. Kyle, I think, is in Los Feliz. And I remember texting Kyle and Christian, holy shit. And again, it was the passion in Mark's voice. It was the authenticity. At the end of that call, I said, Mark, you and I will make this movie together. And he goes, yeah, cool. Let's make a movie. Less than a year later, we were in Manitoba, Canada, making the movie.
That's amazing. Now, so from that point, because this was done independently, how did you get it to Netflix? Because that's another journey, I'm assuming, as well.
Yeah. So thankfully, Mark directed the hell out of the film. We had an incredible cast. Alexandra Daddario, Maddie Hassan, Johnny Knoxville, amazing cast, incredible production, incredible acting. Just Mark made such a fantastic movie that really struck a chord with people. And we ended up getting a deal with a film distribution company, Saban Films. And they were the ones responsible for getting it released all over the world and on Netflix. It was supposed to have a very nice theatrical run. Mm-hmm. However, it was slated for a theatrical run in April 2020, just when the pandemic hit. And I remember we got a review from Owen Gleiberman at Variety, a fantastic review. And he said, the only sad thing about this is that this won't get a theatrical review. And if anything is meant to be played with an audience of raucous film goers, it's this movie. So that was unfortunate. But who knows? It could still play on the midnight circuit, somewhere down the line as a cult movie.
Is there anything that you wish someone would have told you at the beginning of your career?
Just that it's going to be 10 times harder than you thought it would be, and that you'd work 10 times harder than you thought you ever would. And not all hard work is rewarded. A lot of the times
So true.
a lot of the times the reward has to come from the work itself. Right. So as you said, so what kept me through, what got me through the years of trying to make Burying the X or We Summon the Darkness? It was, well, I had this document, I had this script, and I remember Christian would say, like, sometimes he would just read it just to read it because it would make him smile, So a lot of the times the reward comes out of the work itself, or the reward comes from, I got a piece of fan art about 3 or 4 weeks ago from someone who had seen We Summon the Darkness, and they just loved it so much that they drew like a mock poster of it and gave it to me, and that's an incredible thing, So not the rewards won't come in the way that you expect them to, but there are rewards there. Just have to know how to recognize them.
Isn't it interesting that most people in general, but specifically in the film industry, they work towards a goal. And if they don't get the goal, they're unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority of people in the film industry don't get to their goals. Right. Not the goals that they set out, maybe other goals, maybe other situations, maybe other opportunities. But generally speaking, all of us, I think at one point or another said, we're going to be Steven Spielberg. We're going to be Stanley Kubrick. We're going to be Eric Roth. We're going to be whoever that person is that you idolize.
Mm-hmm.
We generally almost always never get to that place, but we get to wherever we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
But so much of our journey is depressing many times because we don't focus on the journey. We focus on the destination. And if you would have focused on the destination with these two projects, you wouldn't have made it. You were actually focused on like just the enjoyment of, well, I wouldn't even say the word enjoyment, but the process. Is that a fair statement?
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. It was like I said, I wrote the movies that I wanted to see. And even if I didn't get to see them on the big screen or on a 60-inch flat screen, they still existed in my mind and on paper.
Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions to ask all my guests. What advice would you give a screenwriter or filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Okay, for screenwriters, find that idea that you fall head over heels in love with. Don't chase the marketplace, okay? Don't try to be the next, don't try to write the next Marvel movie, okay? They've already got the next 5 years of Marvel movies already lined up. And if you really think about it, look at who Kevin Feige's hiring to write and direct these Marvel movies. Is he hiring the big tentpole folks, the people who have made those $100, $300, $400, $500 million grossing movies? Or is he hiring someone like Taika Waititi? Is he hiring someone like James Gunn? He's hiring people with unique and original voices, okay? That's the trick. Find your voice, okay? If you have something to say and only you can say it, and you have an idea and you're the only person that can execute that idea, that's what you should do, okay? Because that's how you'll get noticed. That's how you'll get a meeting, at Marvel or any other place, because they've got all the big action guys. They've got all the big dialogue guys or the next Tarantinos and stuff. But what they're really looking for is a unique, original voice who could take a property like Thor and bring it whole new life, right? Or take a property like the Guardians of the Galaxy and just completely upend, that whole franchise. So that's my advice for screenwriters. Do not chase the marketplace. Work on your voice. When you're talking to friends, when your friends are like, you're so funny because only you do this, or you think this way. Okay, what is it that gives you your voice? What is it that your friends are constantly entertained by? That's your voice. Work on it. Find it. Take chances. Don't worry about selling. Okay. And then for filmmakers out there, again, it's the network of people. It's about getting seen by as many people as possible. Okay. Always produce. Find your, I say a lot of the times making a movie, it's kind of like forming a cult. Okay. You have a document, you have words written on paper that people believe in, that people trust in. And then the cabal grows larger and larger and larger. And then before you know it, money's being spent. Okay. And then at the end of the day, everyone gathers in a room to see what the document has produced, right? It's almost kind of like a cult or a religion, right? So find that team of people that you trust, like when I found Christian and Kyle and the other people that I work with, and you'll be on your way.
Isn't it funny though, when you watch, when you watch Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor, the third one, Guardians of the Galaxy was one of the oddest properties that Marvel owned. They were kind of like in the bargain bin of comic books. I remember them when I was collecting comics. I was just like, the Rocket Raccoon? Like, what? Yeah. And he turned it into a huge franchise. And then Thor was pretty much kind of like almost a third tier character behind all the other ones. The first two movies did, but then he's now one of the favorites because of this humor that you bring. And I'm dying to see the new one, Love and Thunder. It looks amazing. Yeah. But it was because of that unique voice. I hope people listening understand that those two, James Gunn and Keean, I can never say his name.
Taika Waititi.
They both are so authentic to who they are. That's what made them pop. That's what got them these jobs. That's what got them the success that they've gotten. They didn't try to be anybody else. So
yeah, but their highest grossing films, which are, I think, still today, Infinity War and Endgame, were directed by the Russo brothers, who were directing episodes of Community.
Right.
Okay. And Arrested Development. Okay. They didn't go and hire the guy whose last movie was a huge hit at the box office. They hired according to voice and according to perspective and a point of view and something unique.
Right. So. And they just, and the only time they've broken that rule once in a blue moon, with Sam Raimi but Sam hasn't done anything big in a while.
Right.
And Sam has one of the most unique points of view in Hollywood history, honestly. So, but they gave someone like him every tool in the toolbox. And he's like, this is great. I want to keep working like this.
Yeah. And the best parts of that film, and even the reviewers and audiences agree, were the Sam Raimi moments.
Right. The things that made, that's Sam. Sam brought that in.
Right. Yes.
Like I still remember in Spider-Man 2, there was that horror movie in the middle. Doc Ock was coming off.
And that was awesome. Yeah.
That was just literally a horror movie in the middle of and we're like, where did this come from? It's so beautifully done.
That was awesome.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
The longest to learn in the film industry or in life. I think that it would be what I had said, is the reward is in the doing, not in the finished product. That took the longest, because, you write something you love, you think it's going to sell. Not all scripts sell. Not all people see what you see. Does that mean that the last 3-4 months or a year were wasted? No, hopefully not. Because why? Because the next one will be better. Right? Or you learned something along the way. You learned how to write a character better. You learned how to write dialogue better. You learned how to add subtext into your dialogue. So hopefully each script you learn something from, so that the next one's even better. Don't repeat yourself. Don't say, I'm going to write the same thing all over again. You'll never grow that way. You'll never get better that way, and you'll never get noticed that way.
And even if you are sold, it doesn't mean it's going to be made into a movie. Because you had that experience. You got that experience as well.
Yeah, a few times. But that's okay.
Hey, listen. The check, as long as the check clears, we're all good. Eventually,
it did. Eventually, it came. Eventually, it arrived, and thankfully, it did clear.
Yeah, I know so many screenwriters whose IMDb might be short, but they've been working nonstop for a decade or 15 years, script doctoring, working on projects, getting picked up. I mean, working with the biggest people in Hollywood, but yet they just can't get that thing to pop. And they only get maybe once or twice or three times in a decade. It's not easy getting a movie made. Especially now in the studio system. I know I don't have to tell you, sir. I know I don't have to tell you this. What is the biggest thing you learned from your biggest failure in the business?
The biggest thing I learned from my biggest failure was trying to chase the marketplace, looking at deadline, saying, this movie just sold, I'm mad, I'm angry, I can do that. Let me show them I can do that. And then, as I said, you wasted 6 months because at the end of the day, A, that movie already exists and already sold, or that script already existed and already sold, or B, there's no passion in the writing because it comes through. It does come through. As I said, trust your voice, stick with it. It was the moments when I wasn't trusting my voice, when I was trying to be someone else, when I was trying to write something else that I'm not good at. You stumble. You can't be an imposter. So I would say, I've written maybe 2 or 3 scripts simply because I thought they would sell. And of course they didn't, because people saw right through it. So I would say that would sort of be the biggest lesson. And it's as I said earlier, it's the ones that I thought wouldn't sell and the ones I thought no one would like, but I did like, that ended up happening.
And what are 3 of your favorite films of all time?
Hard one, but let's go with Clockwork Orange. Let's go with Halloween. And let's go with Punch Drunk Love.
The heck of a combo, my friend.
Just off the top, but the ones that I can see over and over and over again and find different things in them each time. That's why I think I chose those 3.
And they age. They're different every decade. That's what great art does. As you change, the art change. You watch Clockwork Orange at 11 and you watch it as a 40-year-old, 2 very different movies.
Yeah. Punch Drunk Love came out 2003, 2004. It's been quite a long time. And I saw that film twice in a weekend because it was just had such an impact on me. It was an experimental film all the way through, from wardrobe, soundtrack,
casting,
dialogue, casting, stunt casting, incredible stunt casting. And every experiment, every risk he took paid off incredibly. And now other filmmakers can now benefit from that. Other filmmakers can cast Sandler in a role where he isn't comedic all the time. JJ can experiment now with lens flares because that film used lens flare as an aesthetic sort of piece of it. People started hiring John Bryan to compose their soundtracks because they heard the work that he did. I mean, I was watching some episodes of The Flight Attendant, and that percussive soundtrack, that sort of chaotic sort of drum beat. I said, that's Punch Drunk Love right there, And I remember sort of watching it maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I'm like, I wonder if this thing holds up. I wonder if it's still as amazing. More than ever does that film hold up. And it still has the same impact on me now that it did when I saw it in the theater back in, I think, 2004.
Alan, it has been a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey with us. And hopefully somebody's listening has picked up a couple of these nuggets and hopefully won't be, have so many problems moving forward in their journey. Hopefully they'll avoid some of these pitfalls that you and I have come through over the years. So I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Not problems, opportunities.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.